Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Sharpen Up podcast. I'm your host, J.C. Bruce, with my co-host, Ron Rollins. How are you, Ron?
Fellow Earthlings, hello. How are you? I'm fine. Yes, doing well. Doing well here in Kettering, Ohio. Beautiful. I can't say downtown Kettering, Ohio, because Kettering doesn't have a downtown. So, yeah, I'm
Well,
here. I'm
but
here.
if it did, that's where you would be.
We would be in the
Wherever
heart.
you are is
Yes,
downtown, right?
that's what I like to think. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
very
right.
good. Yes. Well, I'm
It's like
broadcasting from Naples,
downtown,
Florida. Right,
which
right.
which does have a downtown.
It does have a downtown, and
Mhm.
it also is a hurricane magnet, as is the entire state of Florida, which is
Right.
apropos because we're broadcasting this on June 1st in the
Yes.
year of our Lord 2022, and today is the first
Yes.
day of hurricane season.
Hurricane season. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, Ron and
Wow.
I were discussing before we pushed the record button on this that, to the best of our knowledge, neither one of us have ever had a hurricane named for us. No
I know.
Hurricane Ron, no Hurricane Jeff. Um,
It's
but there
you
is a
know if
website we
yeah.
discovered. This is really cool. There's a website called futurehurricanes.fandom.com in which there is a Hurricane Jeffrey and a Hurricane Ron, and they were vicious. They were terrible sometime in the
Terrible.
future.
I remember
So
them. Yeah. Yeah, what kind of I don't want to say anything, bad about anybody, but what kind of person likes hurricanes enough that they create a site imagining future hurricanes and describing their characteristics and strength? I think that's unusual.
I
I
don't
think
know. Yeah,
that's
right. It
weird.
is unusual. It is
Yes.
unusual. But I hesitate to say anything unkind about the people who did this because,
Right.
having spent the entire month glued to the television watching the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial, I hesitate to say anything unkind about anyone.
Anybody, yeah.
Right.
I confess I have been getting all my information on that escapade to be secondhand, either from people who are watching it, like you and some other friends, or from reading news reports, which are enthusiastic in their
There's a lot of
recounting of the
enthusiasm
details.
about this.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. What is your takeaway, other than the fact that they're both despicable people? What's your main takeaway?
Well, first, we probably should note that we are actually recording this prior to June
Prior.
1st. It's broadcasting on June 1st. So events can intervene between
That's true.
this moment and the time we hit the distribution button. But I would say that it is not, it has been just like watching a train wreck.
Yeah.
Watching two human beings who both obviously have serious issues clash. But if you're interested in the legal system, and if you're interested in trials, and it's been fascinating just to watch the procedures associated with this on live TV. I've never seen a trial live streamed like this over such a protracted period of time, and it's been fascinating to watch.
Wow.
But I feel it just seems a shame that this whole thing had to happen. But we'll see what happens.
However, though, I would ask. I mean, you're, as a journalist, you have actually been in and covered trials, and probably earlier in your career, than later, I would imagine, given that you went into management and editing pretty quick. But you have an actual working knowledge of what trials consist of. Before you came to this, would somebody who did not have a proper working knowledge of the way real trials work, who watched this proceeding for the first time, be getting a real world view of what actual trials are usually actually like, or would it be a bit jaundiced and over the top?
Well, most trials are not nearly as fascinating as this when you get into civil litigation, even most defamation trials, because you're not dealing with, interesting personalities. One of the things that's been different about this is all of the videotape and tape recordings and celebrity witnesses, and just the nature of the two people who are suing one another for defamation elevates all of this. But the other thing that struck me as very surprising is the kind of information that's been disclosed during the trial that ordinarily we would think of as being completely behind a firewall. you know, what their personal psychiatrists and doctors have to
Mm.
say about them. And I guess because they've sued one another, the discovery process opens all
Right.
that up. So
Right.
it's really it's really been full disclosure. I covered trials when I was a reporter, and as an editor, have been a witness in trials. In fact, been a defendant in libel trials, defending the newspaper against libel
Right.
suits. So
Right.
by and large, they are, you know, kind of like police work. It looks real exciting on TV, but most of it is
Right.
pretty dull. And the same thing is true for most courtroom proceedings. And but it has been fascinating to watch, and this was certainly far more interesting than most.
Have you ever been a juror?
I have never been, and I have wanted to be.
Yeah,
I have
I
always gotten
was.
rejected. You got on a jury. That's great. Lucky you.
The funny thing was before you came to the Daily News, it was odd because actually I was allowed on a jury in Montgomery County Common Pleas for a criminal case when I was an editor at the newspaper, and during the voir dire portion, the questioning of the potential jurors, um, they learned that I was actually the editor who managed the reporter who was going to be covering the trial, and they still didn't throw me off. In
That's
fact, it was
amazing.
odd. It was weird, yeah, because I was very plain, like, well, yes, I work at the Dayton Daily News. Yes, Rob Modick is my a staff member, employee of mine, and I am his supervisor, and he will be sitting right there covering the trial. In fact, there he is now. And they were like, "Oh, he's fine," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." I thought that would get me tossed off.
Oh yeah.
Interestingly, though, there was also a sheriff's deputy who was personal friends of one of the Dayton police detectives who was going to be testifying, and they let him on the jury too. And I was like, really? I mean, it was a very unsettling experience overall. It was
Yeah,
a
that
shaken
usually
baby,
having a personal
yeah,
relationship with either any of the attorneys involved in the
or
case, or
witnesses, right?
certainly witnesses,
Yeah,
defendants, that's
yeah.
almost always an automatic disqualification. That's surprising.
It was. It turned out to be an enlightening but very unhappy experience. That I really have never forgotten. It was a shaken baby case in which the child was severely. It was a felonious assault, not a homicide, but the child was severely damaged, and we ended up acquitting the foster mother who was accused because there was actually no witness to her doing it, and we realized that there was something missing. We turned out after the trial was over, we learned in the jury room from the prosecutors that there was a witness, which is why they had gone forward with the case. It was a young, like a 7-year-old boy who was also a foster child in the same household, had seen the attack, but by the time the trial was happening, he had already been in like 8 or 9 other foster homes, and it turned out he could not identify her on the witness stand. So they had to pull him out, and it was too late to call off the trial. They tried anyway. And when we all heard that, we were, needless to say, we were upset.
I'll
So
bet.
yeah, we basically let somebody go who scrambled this child, and just it was awful. I mean, this was 30, almost 30 years ago. It obviously stuck with me. It was a very powerful experience. But
Yeah.
oh well, it was as a journalist, it was fascinating to actually experience what happens inside a jury room. The way that the discussion evolves, and the things that people bring out onto the table that mattered to them or that they noticed. Um, I don't think there's a better way to do it, but it's also a deeply imperfect system.
Yeah,
Um,
and that is an interesting point, because as journalists, we spend most of our time on the outside looking in, trying to
mhm.
figure out what's really going on.
Yep,
And
yep,
on those occasions when you can actually be on the inside of something and see the inner workings. I
yep.
worked in Washington, D.C. and for a congressman for 6 months when I was much younger.
Oh, I don't
And to
think I knew that.
be, yeah. And I was his press secretary, and really very, very bad at it, and and hated it. And he ended up going to prison for
Wow,
yeah. So it was
that was a fun press release to write, I bet.
yeah. Actually, I had been fired by that time. Yeah, I was like his third or fourth press secretary, and he was only a freshman congressman. So you could gives you some sense of the
Yeah,
volatility
right,
of the place.
right,
But anyway, 6 months, working on Capitol Hill,
right,
it was like, wow, this is really interesting, because it was like getting a master's degree in political science to be on the
right,
inside and see how things, are structured and worked, and how
right.
people interact with one another. So yeah, being on the inside is awesome.
Yeah, the earlier you learn in journalism how much you don't know and how much you really will never fully understand, the way, regardless of how much you learn about the subject you're writing about, the better off you're going to be as a
Yeah.
journalist, I think. Journalists who act like they've got it all figured out, and or reporters who act like they've got it all figured out and know everything there is to know about the thing they're writing about are usually wrong. There's just so much more
Right.
that is going on than because we're on the outside looking through a keyhole, and there's somebody kind of putting their hand up in front of the keyhole, like this. You're seeing like little bits and pieces of what's actually happening, unless you're actually standing there watching a fire, or something like that. I mean, that's different. But if you're trying to do any kind of investigation or government coverage, it's tough. You never really know what's happening on the inside. It's like,
Right.
oh,
Because you don't know, you don't know about relationships, you don't know about motivations, you don't know
right,
about, um, what sort of incentives people have to behave the way
right,
they do. And,
exactly.
and you have to be careful. It's like, to paraphrase Clint Eastwood in Magnum Force, a journalist has to know her limitations.
That's true.
So,
Well, which may bring us to the birds aren't real promise that we
right,
made
right.
in the
This is,
we
this is
we
why we're
did
here today. Right.
we did this has been a very dour, somber, sober podcast so far, Jeff, and I feel the need to fulfill the promise we made to our thousands of global listeners last time around, that we would do actual research for this one, and I committed to finding out three important things to bring to today's podcast, and I'm prepared to do that now if you are ready.
I am ready. The only thing I would say in advance of this is that, it's important, Ron, to distinguish between, we talked about conspiracy theories, and there's a
Right,
difference between, say, a conspiracy theory and just a
right,
myth. And a lot of
right.
myths are harmless, like the myth that there's such a thing as an abominable snowman, or
Right.
Bigfoot, or
Oh, no,
Sasquatch. I mean,
wait.
those are myths as opposed to real facts,
Facts, right.
like the skunk ape,
The
which,
skunk ape is a fact, right,
right,
right.
I mean, we know there's no such thing as Godzilla, you
Right.
know, but the
Well,
Loch
wait.
Ness monster is real. I mean, we
I
know
think
that,
he is
right?
real.
So
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah. There's
So
pictures. Well, there's
right.
pictures of Godzilla too, but we've also seen pictures of the guy inside the suit. So, you can do some clever internet research and find out the truth, as we have done.
As we have
Well,
done about the question of, are
of
birds
whether
real,
birds
right?
real. So, in the last podcast, I made mention of birds aren't real, the movement, and you had not heard of it yet. So I'm here to tell you
Mhm.
that in the research phase of the podcast, which consisted of me going to Wikipedia, I looked up birds aren't real, and I'm now going to read Birds Aren't Real is a satirical conspiracy theory which posits that birds are actually drones operated by the United States government to get this, to
Oh.
spy on American citizens.
So it is
Um,
in fact a conspiracy theory.
well, in 2018, journalist Rachel Roberts described birds aren't real as, quote, a joke that thousands of people are in on. Now, this was started in 2017 on a whim by a young man named Peter McIndoe, and he basically created the birds aren't real conspiracy theory as a retort slash send up of actual right wing conspiracy theories, which are numerous and legion, and we all know about those. So the interesting thing about it is that he actually at some point had to go on to social media and disclaim it, because he had people actually thinking that he actually believed it. So he had to deny his own conspiracy theory.
Yeah, but
However, there's
that's
a very
because government agents were holding guns to his head, right?
well, right, or to the heads of the last few living birds. So the actual the birds, they claim that the birds were all birds were killed by the federal government between 1959 and 1971, replaced with look-alike drones used by the government to spy on us. The birds, for example, sit on power lines to recharge themselves. Birds poop on cars as a tracking method, and that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated by the government due to his reluctance to kill all the birds. So there you go. That's birds aren't
Whoa.
real. Yeah,
So that
there
this would
is a
include,
web. website that I
Hummingbirds?
recommend you checking out. Yeah.
This
All
includes
birds, well,
hummingbirds,
especially
right?
hummingbirds, because hummingbirds, well, of course, think about it, Jeff, because they get right up close to you.
They
Hummingbirds are
can
the very
hover.
few, yeah, they're one of the few birds that actually like come right outside your porch there and look at you for a while, and you think they're cute. That proves it. So,
Did you know that hummingbirds were the only birds that can fly backwards?
I did know that. Yeah, yeah. I hadn't thought about it in a while, but now that you mention it, yeah, it makes sense.
I
Is that
wonder if
true?
it's just hummingbirds that are drones.
Uh,
Maybe they just got this a little wrong. I mean, when's the
well,
last time you had a hummingbird in your hand? I
it's been a
mean,
while, but I will say that since I've noticed this, since I've learned about birds aren't real, I have noticed that they sit on power lines a lot more often than I thought they did. And I
yeah.
think that the recharging thing is, well, the other, speaking of flying things, I had also made reference, as you recall, during the religion portion of our last podcast, to the to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, and again, you expressed dismay at your lack of knowledge on the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. So during today's research phase, I did another Wikipedia search, and I have something to report. So I will say first that I'll go over this very quickly because there is a spaghettimonster.org website that fills you in on the complete gospel of the flying spaghetti monster. But the flying spaghetti monster is the deity of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, or Pastafarianism. Pastafarianism, right? A social movement that promotes a lighthearted view of religion. And basically, this was made up several years back by a guy who was trying to make a point in some school board meeting about religion and the place that he felt it should not play in the proceedings of a public government entity. And so he tried to have his Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster have the same um, uh, input into the matter at hand that other religions were trying to have. So you see where this went. However, once you see the little symbol of the flying spaghetti monster, you will notice that you have seen this on the back of cars, the way a lot of Christians have the little fish thing. Um, yeah,
Oh, I have not seen
you'll
that. Okay, so in other words, I
you will
may have
recognize
seen
it.
it and don't recognize it. Well, I'll tell you what we're
That's
going to
it.
do.
Yep.
We're
Go
going
to
to
Wikipedia. Yep.
make note of this, and we will
Hmm.
include an image of
Yes.
the flying spaghetti monster in the next Sharpen Up newsletter, which will
Oh,
be
please do.
going out.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be going out June 1st, the day that
Thank
this
you.
this
Yeah, that'd
podcast
be
is
great.
being broadcast. So for those of you out there who are listening to this or viewing this
Hmm.
on YouTube, know
Right.
that you can spare yourself the tedious search on the internet for the
Which,
emblem of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster simply
right.
by subscribing to
Scrolling to
the
the
Sharpen
newsletter.
Up
Right.
newsletter, right?
Right.
Which is easy to do. Just go to
Hmm.
www.jcbruce.com and a very annoying pop-up will show up when you do that and sign up, and you can, get on the newsletter list, and it's free. There's all
And it's
sorts of
good.
benefits. Well, that's right.
Right.
I mean, you can go to Costco, for
Right.
instance, and tell people, hey,
Hmm.
I'm on the Sharpen Up newsletter list,
Right.
and they will say congratulations. They will say
That's
that's
right.
wonderful, thank you.
Right.
Do you have a
Sort
credit
of,
card?
sort of like what President Biden said to Kim Jong Un. Hello. Period. Hello. Period. That was the only message he had for him. I thought that was pretty good. Later on, it'll of course be called a gaffe because that's just what the media does. But didn't sound
Right,
like a gaffe to me. It sounded
right.
like, hey, you be good over there.
It's gaffed
I
by all
had
those
one.
journalists who think they know more than they do.
The more than they do. I had promised our numerous listeners and viewers one other piece of research that I did track down. I had made mention of the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip, which is my personal favorite, in which Calvin's
Yes.
dad explains color to Calvin, and I can share that with you now. It's a Sunday strip, so it'll take a moment to read, but I hope the payoff will be worth it. Calvin comes out to his dad, who's of course sitting on the front porch enjoying a cup of coffee. He says, "Dad, how come old photographs are always in black and white? Didn't they have color film back then?" And Calvin's dad says, "Well, sure they did. In fact, those old photographs are in color. It's just the world was black and white then. And Calvin goes, really? And Dad says, yep, the world didn't turn color until sometime in the 1930s, and it was pretty grainy color for a while too. Calvin says, that's really weird. Calvin's dad takes a sip of coffee and says, well, truth is stranger than fiction. And Calvin says, but then why are old paintings in color? If the world was black and white, wouldn't artists have painted it that way? And Calvin's dad says, not necessarily. A lot of great artists were insane. So Calvin at this point is going, what? Wait, his arms outstretched, like, this makes no sense. He says, but how could they have painted in color anyway? Wouldn't their paints have been in shades of gray back then? And Calvin's dad says, well, of course, but they turned colors like everything else did in the 1930s. So Calvin says, so why didn't old black and white photos turn color too? And Calvin's dad says, because they were color pictures of black and white, remember? So the last panel is Calvin sitting with Hobbes, and Calvin says, the world is a complicated place, Hobbes. And Hobbes says, whenever it seems that way, I take a nap in a tree and wait for dinner. So there you go. That is a classic.
That is,
oh
yeah.
yes, that was a good one. I miss Calvin and Hobbes. I mean, I have a theory that is, well, perhaps a conspiracy theory, that when Bill Watterson and Gary Larson gave up their jobs, that was when the actual decline in newspapers began. I don't think it had anything to do with the internet. I think it had to do with people just didn't want to. They couldn't stand to see the newspaper without Calvin and Hobbes and the Far Side in it anymore, because it made them sad.
I know the demographics are such that this is almost a cliche, being a male of a certain age category, but
Which we are.
right. I mean, some of the most important readers of newspapers are guys like us, who the first thing they do is turn to the funny pages. So like right now, I only read religiously two things in the local newspaper. And my two favorite strips are Dilbert and Pearls Before Swine.
Two very good ones, yes. Probably the last remaining, I would say probably the last remaining strips of that ilk that we were talking about, the back that sort of seemed to harken back to the old Bloom County,
Far Side
and Calvin and all that. The one actually, the Dayton Daily News runs Bliss, which is a single panel strip by a guy who's a New Yorker cartoonist that I like, and it's heavy on pets, placing pets in situations in which they can talk and it anthropomorphizes animals quite a lot. It's a very funny strip. I believe my favorite one of that might be a man and a woman, no pets in this one, sitting on a mountain peak, and obviously on a hiking vacation, and they're looking over this beautiful sunset in this valley, and she points into the distance and she says, wow, from here you can almost see that cabin where I cheated you on. From when I where I cheated on you. And he just has this blank look on his face. Like, okay.
Oh geez.
Yeah, so anyway, I don't know what the dog would say about that, but anyway, we need to get back to hurricanes. I think it's a serious failure of hurricane nomenclature that we have not yet had a Hurricane Ron and a Hurricane Jeff, when, according to your newsletter, they've been naming hurricanes after men since what, 1979 or something like that?
Yeah, since the 1970s. It used to be that they were always named after women, and they decided to. Well, it's not fair. I mean, why should women get all the hurricanes? I mean, so I'm certainly glad that boys got a chance to get in the game too. But you're right. I mean, so it alternates, boy, girl, and but in all of that time, there hasn't been, as far as we know, now are many thousands of readers with access to Wikipedia, Encyclopedia Galactica, and the internet in general can probably correct us on this. But as far as we know, neither one of us have had a hurricane named after us. So I don't know. I'm feeling a little left out of the party, like you show up and you're in the corner and nobody's talking to you. And it's like, what have I got, bad breath, or what's going on here?
Well, I will say, as somebody named Ron is a name that really is not used much anymore in child naming. I mean, when you see there's no new little kids being born today and given the name Ron. It's Jacob, and you know, and Luke and, you know, Elias and, you know, whatever cool names kids get today that their parents give them. But Ron, that's why I think my name.
Ron's fallen out of fashion.
Yeah, Ron's fallen out of fashion. It's a 1950s, 60s, 70s name, and
Well, the
it's
first
you
hurricane
know,
named
yeah,
after a boy was Hurricane Bob.
Bob. That's true.
Bob.
I don't think he heard. I don't know. I wonder where Robert rates on the list of popular baby names these days. I think that might be one that's also not as big as it used to be.
Probably not.
Yeah, yeah,
Probably
yeah.
not.
We should look. More research
I think
for
that we got
next
more research here. Like, what are
next
the
month's
popular
next
names
week's
these days?
podcast. Yeah,
And
that's
all
right.
right. And what
Yep.
happens if, like, say, your parents didn't get the memo? Let's just say you're born
Oh, right,
in, 2022. And
right,
like the hot names are names like, Logan and,
right, right.
what, and Logan, by the way, is an excellent name
Just
to name
an
a
excellent
child.
name. Right, right,
Right,
exactly.
or Casey, that's another really
Another good
excellent
one. Yeah,
name.
you were a name. You were ahead of your time on that.
That's
But say
right.
you name your
So
kid. You name to your point. You name your kid Ralph, and
yeah,
that's just wouldn't be
that
done
would be a
today, right?
problem.
Yeah,
That would
wouldn't
be
be
a
done.
problem.
Mhm.
Right. So,
Yeah.
but so say you're born this year and 20 years hence, your parents had named you, I don't know, Steve. Is that
Yeah,
even a name anybody's being given
I don't think so.
anymore? No offense to all the Steves out there. I think it's a
Right.
perfectly good name. I have friends named Steve.
I have a
Probably
brother-in-law named
people
Steve.
named Steve who are listening to this, right?
Well, at our house,
But
we have a Steve story, and it is that our corgi, whose name is Neo, he's about 5 years old. When he was adopted by us, his name was indeed Steve, which I think is an odd name to give a dog, but someone had named our corgi Steve. We changed his name, as new pet owners will do. And the main reason we did was because we had a brother-in-law named Steve, and we really had a hard time
ah,
imagining bad Steve, bad Steve, down Steve, and we didn't. We just didn't. He's aware of this, and he's grateful that we made that change. The actual Steve, I mean. So yeah, yeah. He would not have. Yeah. Anyway.
which is too bad because I think Steve is a really cool name for a dog.
See, we thought just the opposite. We couldn't imagine a dog named Steve. It seemed so.
It
I don't
seems so
know.
human.
So
Yeah.
human that it just gave us the willies, kind of. But no, Willie would be a good name for a corgi, but Steve, I can't.
How
We
about
have to agree to disagree on that one.
Maurice? Maurice
That'd be
would be
good.
a good, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I went to high school with a Maurice. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
He
So I'm
was
going
a
to
cool
tell you
guy.
a story, and I know time is
Okay,
running out, but
go
when we
ahead.
go to restaurants and you have to
Yep.
like leave your name because there's a wait. Um,
Oh,
and when I say, okay, my name is Jeff, the problem with a word with, just sounds and sounds is that when somebody yells it over, yeah, is there, you don't know if they said your name or not. So I've started when I give my name at restaurants saying, I give them the name Xavier. So, and I'm kind of growing fond of the name Xavier. So I'm thinking about
I'm gonna do
changing my
that.
name to Xavier.
I'm gonna
So
take that. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Well,
in the future, if you would just want to call me X,
okay. Yeah.
that would be, I know you're talking to me.
Thank you. I may I may do that. I may start using Maurice now that you basically
Maurice.
reminded me. That's such a good name
Okay.
because
So
there's the song
henceforth, you
too.
shall be
Yeah.
Maurice and I shall
And
be
you'll be
Xavier.
Xavier, right? So there's the Steve Miller song. And some people call me Maurice. Yeah,
Right.
so right. But
Right.
oh well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap this one up.
Wow. I'm trying to think. So have we made any other? Oh, we've made a promise to our thousands of listeners to look up the most popular baby names for the next one.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That'll be next time.
All
And
right.
maybe we
That'll
should,
be.
as if we can do it, point out baby names that should be avoided.
That would
Right.
be easy. Well, actually, I think we can mention there a tidbit in the newsletter of the top 10 hurricane names for this year. Would you like me to
Right.
reel them off right quick? They are
We can.
Alex, Bonnie, Colin, Danielle, Earl, Fiona, Gaston, or Gaston, I presume, Hermione, Ian, and Julia. So there you go.
Those are all really good names.
Yeah, they are good names. Yeah,
I like those
Earl.
names.
I don't think that, but Earl would be a good name for a corgi, but not for a human, I think.
Why do I have a feeling that Earl has been a hurricane? But they wouldn't do that, would they?
I don't think they repeat. Yeah.
They don't
I mean,
repeat, right? It's like once you hang up the jersey, that number's done, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, but unless the president takes a Sharpie to a map and redirects the hurricane magically.
Right. Well, that would certainly make all the difference in the world.
It would. All right. Well,
okay. Next time we'll be doing
next
that.
time. Baby names. Oh, and there's a lot of juicy tidbits in the upcoming newsletter. So yeah, we'll have a lot to talk about. Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool.
Absolutely. All right.
All right.
Signing off.
Later, Maurice.
See ya, Xavier. Be good.